Gex has always been a bit of an oddity to me. I never played it and I never rented it, but for a character that looks like this, you would think he could become as iconic as Mario, right? Well, in 1995, Crystal Dynamics created a 2D platformer game called Gex for the 3DO, you know, everyone's favorite console, made by Panasonic in 95. I mean, if you weren't rocking the 3DO, what were you doing? Yeah, but besides it coming out on a completely irrelevant console, the game probably became more popularly known after it was later ported to the PlayStation 1 and the Sega Saturn. Sure, it didn't become as popular as Mario or Sonic the Hedgehog would be, at least not yet. I mean, what can you expect? History proves that green characters don't make good video game mascots. I'm looking at you, Croc, Gecko, Green Mario. But things were really going to change when Crystal Dynamics decided to up the ante a little bit and bring Gex to 3D, much like Mario had recently done on the N64. In some regard, it seemed like the developers really wanted this game to be a comedic parody of a ton of TV shows and movies, with humor similar to The Simpsons, and even got Rob Cohan, one of the writers for The Simpsons, on board to do some of the writing in Gex. And interestingly enough, while a lot of platformers at the time were using polygons to make their characters, they actually built a full skeletal structure for the 3D version of Gex and built skin textures over him, which is partially why Gex doesn't look as blocky in his 3D games when you compare them to other 3D platformer protagonists. Now, reviews for this game had ranged from mediocre to just okay to purely awful, so I have a feeling that we're in for a treat. Gex 3D Into The Gecko, which is such a weird name, originally released in February 1998 on the PlayStation, but was later ported to the Nintendo 64 a little over 6 months later. This time rebranding the game to Gex 64 Into The Gecko, keeping that odd subtitle. But in the process of porting it to the Nintendo 64, Crystal Dynamics did run into some hardware limitations found on the N64, which caused them to have to cut all of the cutscenes completely out of the N64 version of the game, and also had to cut a couple levels out of the game as well. But I mean, losing the cutscenes was really a huge deal, because when you play this game, if you're on the N64 version, you literally have absolutely no idea what's going on or why anything's going on, where the PlayStation version of the game completely sets up what is going on in the story. Here's a clip of the fantastic cutscene that 1998 had to show for people if you had a PlayStation version of this game.
Since retiring from the public eye, I have resigned myself to a life of solitude. For 2 years, I started my day watching supermarkets sweep. Days, then weeks, blurred into one long, sorry afternoon chat show. The next thing I know, some government goons show up at my house. Seems they've caught a whiff of old Mr. Sunshine himself, Raz. He's back in the media dimension, and they think I'm crazy enough to go back in after him.
But of course, with the release on the N64 version, maybe this is the more defined and definitive version of this game, and that's what we're going to be looking at today to see how it holds up all these years later. Loading the game up for the first time, we have absolutely no context whatsoever as to what is going on, and honestly, this is really jarring compared to the PlayStation version, because at least you have some sort of an idea that you're in a television in the PlayStation version. This one just has you turning on the game and you're just, bam, in this hub world? I'm not sure what to call this. I mean, at least we get some cheesy voiceovers already.
It's tail time.
So that's a great start. Interestingly enough, they actually changed voice actors between releases of the game. Some releases had a British actor, and mine did not. Okay, so this open area that you're just dropped into is kind of laggy, and honestly, this game looks pretty bad even by Nintendo 64 standards. Especially if you put this side by side with footage online from the PlayStation version of this game, it really shows that they kind of had to water down some stuff here. And I still have no idea what I'm doing. Okay, I'm all of a sudden climbing up a wall. Well, that's interesting. So to start stuff off, we jump into this first world and we finally get to actually get into the game and see what these levels look like. Maybe the box for this game gives us a little context as to what's going on. 115 moves? Really? That's pretty innovative for a N64 platformer. Let's see what Gex can do here. Well, he can do this. That's pretty much it, at least for fighting. He does have some moves like bouncing on his tail to jump higher, I guess, and he can use his tongue to reach platforms if he just barely misses it. It's kind of weird, but at least it works. But geez, there is a learning curve in this game, especially if you're coming from literally any other 3D platformer. But hey, this is the ultimate free roaming game, clearly, except the camera is really bad. And dang it, does he move as violently as ever when you're trying to move him around or do any type of platforming. The game is very slippery with these controls. I'll be honest, for a first level to a game, I'm really not liking this world. There's a ton of frame rate drops, the render fog is intense, and honestly, this first area is just extremely ugly. Also, Gex keeps making quips for some reason.
Hey, I feel like I'm trapped in Boy George's pants.
And won't stop. Anyways, I wander around for a bit. I find this bunny costume. I think this is a play on maybe Bugs Bunny. And we eventually find our way out of here. And what an experience and first impression this game has left us so far. Next, we're moving on to this super spooky castle. Okay, actually this level, I'll be honest, is kind of fun. The frame rate issue seems to be contained here as there's multiple rooms instead of it trying to load this huge open area. At least I feel like I can take a moment to maybe figure out the controls and camera a little bit without feeling like my Nintendo 64 might catch on fire in the process. I gotta say, I kind of dig the atmosphere on this level, and the moving wall with a face in it actually is really cool, and it's fitting to this haunted house aesthetic. This level is drastically different than the level before, and Gex even has some new quips.
Red rum, red rum.
They're still dumb, but hey, they're new. Look what we found here, a flooded toilet. Multiple flooded toilets. What a really odd bathroom that anyone would have in their house, if you think about it. And look, we even see references to slasher films with this masked killer looking thing. Good thing it has a terrible AI. Next, we're going on to our very first boss fight. And actually, it's not too bad either. Which makes me really wonder what on earth the mess of the first level that we experienced was. Seriously, nothing made sense there whatsoever. But this boss fight is at least creative enough, simple enough, and kind of reminds me a little bit of Crash Bandicoot and just the fact that it's not awful. Maybe that's what it is. But now that we've beat the boss, we now have unlocked more levels, and we're going on to this Chinatown level or something. This one ramps up the difficulty a little, but not in the way you would want a game to do it. Instead of it being a challenge with hard platforming or difficult enemies, you just get lost. That's it. I got lost a lot. It's not a fun level at all. It's extremely difficult to navigate for no reason whatsoever. This is really confusing me with the consistency of this game so far, as we've had some okay levels and then this level. Hey look, we found another spooky level, and it's just reused assets from the second world. Okay, so apparently this game makes at least 2 levels using the same theme or assets from each world and then translates them into levels. It's not the worst thing, but after beating a tough level like Chinatown, I don't really want to have to jump into a world that looks the same and reminds me of the terrible navigation I've had to deal with before, so I'm not too much of a fan of reused maps like this. Hey look though, we found a space level and it's kind of neat, except now I can't breathe. I'm literally suffocating. Okay, well now we're going on to Circuit Central. This level has charges that make me jump higher onto platforms, and it's actually really challenging here, but it's also kind of fun, dare I say that here. The only thing is, this bridge section is really difficult with the very slippery controls and the camera jerking around whenever I enter rooms. This is a really recurring issue when you're in a platformer game where the N64 days didn't seem to know what to do with cameras, and Gex handles this in the worst way possible, where it just moves the camera but also moves your directional input. So if you're holding left to try to align yourself with something and the camera happens to move, you better make sure to adjust your direction, or you'll just go flying off of your platform with the direction pointing whichever way the camera moved to instead of actually what you wanted to do. Also, I kind of got a close-up on Gex here, and he looks really cool when you get to see him close up. And I actually wish we could have seen more of this rather than this blur that we typically are looking at throughout this game. Now, the box says this game is a sarcastic parody of a bunch of shows and movies, and I honestly don't see it at all. I mean, I guess James Bond by wearing a tux in the main lobby area, but not having the British voice actor, kinda kills it. And was I Bugs Bunny earlier? I don't know. I mean, in the haunted house level, we didn't even have a suit on or a costume, so I don't really know what this was a parody of. Yeah, this level's a dinosaur level from everyone's favorite Dinosaur World movie, I guess? I mean, it's not like it's making a reference to Jurassic Park or anything. This is just its own thing. This level actually isn't too bad, except the camera makes platforming even harder here. I mean, look at me trying to land on the flowers, and mind you, you're looking at my best footage of an attempt on this that I did in my entire playthrough of this game, and I tried this part a lot. One thing that's really interesting about this game is how, in one way, the game is linear, which is really nice just to have to go from point A to point B and kind of complete the course to get on with the game. But I guess since they needed to shove some sort of level of replayability in, sometimes it feels like this game just shifts randomly into trying to become a collectathon or wants you to do something similar to a collectathon, and it's really jarring at times. I mean, going from point A to B with obstacles and little things to collect along the way is fine, in the same manner you would see a game like Crash Bandicoot do, but here it never really wants to commit to just being one genre, and I feel like it hurts this game more because if this game was just more a linear running and platforming game, I think it would be a lot more fun. It definitely gets bogged down a bit whenever it tries to make you do something other than just getting somewhere, which is hard enough with these cameras and controls. This next boss fight is cool. I mean, I don't know what on earth that thing is, but it's not a bad boss and it's kind of fun. I still feel like a little bit of a story would have really helped because I seriously have no idea what's going on. Now, if you looked at the PlayStation 1 version of this game, at least in the little cutscene at the beginning, you get a little bit of context as to what's going on. Essentially, you're a retired secret gecko operative or something, and some bad guy essentially is taking over TV channels, and the Secret Service needs you to go on a mission into the television and jump world to world or channel to channel to stop the bad guy. Simple enough plot, but there's no explanation of this whatsoever on the N64 version, and I feel like it would have made way more sense had I have known this when I first jumped into this game. I do have to say I like the way Gex dresses up between levels and that he has a different costume, sometimes a parody, sometimes just a costume associated with whatever level we're in. It's just kind of fun, and I do have to say the level variety is unique, I guess. I mean, when you look at games from this era, typically you would have a green grassy world, a fire world, an underwater world, and while this game kind of follows that, it also goes off of the tropes that are standard sometimes too, and at least you feel like when going into new levels, not reused asset levels, that you're getting a completely fresh experience each time, and that's really cool thematically for a game like Gex. I actually got really far in this game, but honestly, going to the repeated settings and trying to do some more challenging platforms with these controls weren't the thing I was most excited for, and apparently there's also a section for cheat codes. I almost forgot these were a thing, but back in the day you could type in these really long cheat codes, so I decided to try one out just to unlock all of the worlds and see what we still had yet to see. It looks like we had seen pretty much everything. But there's a level called Gexzilla? I gotta say, this is a really stupid and fun boss fight here. It feels like a lot of people probably would have used cheats just to get to play the Gexzilla level. I mean, mostly all you do is spam B, but look at this. Look how awesome this actually looks. It's pretty great. Of course, if Gexzilla wasn't awesome enough, there is a final boss fight where you fight through a level and then stand off against Rez, the main bad guy from the game, but you wouldn't know that if you were playing the N64 version. And it's pretty epic, I guess, but honestly, Gexzilla was so much cooler. At least it has some level of epicness before you end the main stuff and content that's featured in this game. This game did also have some bonus levels. They're pretty boring, I guess. It's just this. Get these gems and that's it. There was also this added Nintendo 64 underwater level that had the Titanic in it that was exclusive if you bought the N64 version, so you had to flock out and buy the game again so you could experience the N64 version of this game. But honestly, this level was only included because they had to cut out other levels that couldn't be included on the PlayStation version. So it's kind of a give and take. And honestly, that's kind of the gists of Gex 64. It definitely is really weird that some levels are drastically better and way more fun than others, and it seems really unfocused in its development and could have actually gone down in history as a classic, had they literally just tightened up the camera and movement a little bit better, and maybe made some of the level designs a little bit more focused. But seriously, nothing is worse than a 3D platformer where you feel like you don't have control, you can't see where you're going, and the levels just aren't fun to play on. But there's definitely some levels that are actually fun, and I definitely found some more enjoyment out of this game than I expected, especially since this isn't a game that I had nostalgia for. It's not a game I remember playing back in the day. I don't have fond memories sitting in my living room playing as this green gecko looking thing. I feel like I would have liked it, especially because I was really into spies when I was in my younger years because of GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. But yeah, it holds up alright. It's definitely not a classic, but it's not nearly a bad game or a awful game by that matter either. Well, that's it for Gex, and not too long after this game released, they decided to try to pump out another game before the generation ended, and as you could expect when making a sequel to a game that's already somewhat mediocre, the game somehow sold 6 million units and became the best-selling adventure game on the PlayStation for 1999. How?